Hi, thanks so much everyone coming out tonight. It's great to be here. My name is Professor Elizabeth Shlala. I'm a historian of the Middle East and North Africa, and I want to thank Karen Kiefer and Eileen Corkery, the student board who I spoke to before this evening, Andrew, Tom Wesner, Margaret Lawrence, and Peter Martin, all my friends on C21 for inviting me to be with you this evening. I say I'm a historian of Middle East and North Africa because although some people in this room took a first year enduring question pair course with me, Geographies of Imperialism, one of the, not all of you have, and one of the assignments that we often do is called Museum of You, where you have to pick 3 objects and then curate your life story through those 3 objects. Every year students ask me to do that, and every year I say no, just because I feel like it's more their experience than my experience. But tonight is an opportunity where I can tell you a little more about my life story and why I am a historian of the Middle East and North Africa, which is really not something I've shared in class before. So the 3 main pieces to my story are family, faith, and history. And so that's how I would start what I would call the story of my life, and how every day, more and more, I fall in love with the story of my life. The story of my life, though, doesn't just start with me, right? We're all the products of our families. And the story of my life really starts at the turn of the 20th century with Mary Agnes Murad, who at that time was a 1-year-old little girl who was born outside of Beirut, Lebanon. Her mother left her in the care of an older sister and traveled to America for a better life for herself and her girls. She worked for a year in a factory to gain enough money to bring the girls over on a ship to Ellis Island. When little 2-year-old Mary got there with her older sister, she had pink eye. She had gotten conjunctivitis during the ship, and at that time, she was considered an undesirable, diseased, and the girls were sent back. They went back to Lebanon, their mom stayed here, and she worked for another year in the factory to get enough money for the girls to come over. When my grandma arrived, now she's like 3 or 4, she didn't really know her mom anymore, and they were split. Her elder sister, who she really relied on, went to New Jersey, and she was sent to family in Connecticut, and she used to tell the story of how she would sit on the porch all day long and cry because she missed her sister, and she didn't really know her mom. Now, my great-grandmother was probably 3 feet tall, but a force of nature. My grandmother, for all I can remember, was always about 4 feet tall and a force of nature. And she had a really strong faith. And I think despite what we call trauma now, she had a resilience thanks to her faith. She prayed a lot. She had us all do our sacraments. She really would talk about God with us, and it had a huge influence on my life. It had a huge influence on her children's lives, my dad being one of her children, and it really tied me both to that Lebanese heritage that I had, but also to that faith tradition that was just a part of my family and would really influence me for the rest of my life. So let me talk about my life a little bit. The most important, I think, choice I ever made in my entire life was going my junior year abroad to Florence, Italy. It's probably still the most important decision I made in my life. Maybe where I chose to go to college, my Catholic Jesuit education, but then also when I made this decision to go to Florence, Italy. I went because I had to fulfill my core. I had to pass oral and written language proficiency, and I'm the type of person who really, unless she's doing an immersive language, can't just learn it at books, right? I had to really live it. So at the end of the 20th century, I think I'm blocking myself with this chair. At the end of the 20th century, believe it or not, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have FaceTime. We didn't have personal computers. So, and it was like $1.50 a minute to call home. So when I decided to go abroad for the year, I was deciding to really leave everyone and everything that I knew and take a huge leap of faith and go abroad. And I have to say that decision to do that was really scary. I definitely prayed about it, I'm sure. And the person who I roomed with became one of my lifelong best friends because we had to. We had each other. And 3 or 4 weeks into that experience, I met a boy from outside of Florence, an Italian, who is now my husband of 25 years. And I have to tell you something. Thank you, Sam. And I have to tell you, and in fact, when I told him I was doing this talk, he goes, I know it's going to be about me. But he's right, it is about him. But I have to tell you that I think it would have been really hard to commit to that relationship and commit to that entire experience if everything was on social media. And I was posting, and people were commenting from home, and it was like something out there, and maybe they'd be like, you're crazy, who is it? You know, all that stuff. So I think there was something to like just leaving, committing myself to what was going on in Italy, and really praying. I think praying has been very important in my life. It's had me center myself, and it's had me commit and connect to something bigger than myself. So I graduate, we get married. It's now the beginning of the 21st century. Okay, 2001. I was pregnant with my first child, who's in the room, Lorenzo. And I was involved in the charter school movement in New York City. So we were living in New Jersey, and I was commuting to New York City. Very pregnant, taking the train to New York. My stop was World Trade. I promise you, I never got out of the World Trades. I think we were 6 or 8 feet even below, levels below ground, even where the train came in. I never came out of the World Trade Center without looking up and thinking, that's a heck of a lot of building on top of me. It was a huge, massive structure. So in February of that year, I had the best day of my life and also one of the hardest days of my life. My grandma, Mary, who was a baby, is now in her 90s. I'm on maternity, and she's sort of failing and in hospital. True to my grandmother, she's kind of in and out of it, but the entire time she's packing, she's getting ready, she's doing laundry, she's yelling at us to get stuff together, get stuff out of the laundry, get the clothes. This is not happening, right? It's happening for her. It's not happening for anyone else in the room. Funny enough, there's also a cat. We don't know what this, my grandmother really hated cats, but there's a cat in her room the entire time. She's getting ready to leave. She keeps telling us to put the cat out. We just agree. We mainly just agreed with my grandmother. It's a Friday night, and the whole family had been in and out. I grew up with lots of cousins and aunts and uncles, and we're gonna go out to dinner, and one of my cousins says, you know, it's about your due date. Maybe you should get checked before we go out to dinner tonight. Who knows? So we do an ultrasound, and the doctor says, oh, you're not going anywhere. Tonight's the night. Your baby's coming. Okay. So we're in the hospital. The baby comes the next morning. Honestly, amazing. Amazing grace. So beautiful, so wonderful. The whole family's in the hospital, coming back and forth, back and forth. And someone has to come to my room and let me know that sometime during that morning, my grandmother, in the same hospital on a different floor, passed away. I truly believe that that too was an act of grace. I cannot believe that one of the most important people in my entire life passed away the same day one of the most important people in my entire life came into the world. And I like to think that they, I don't know, high-fived, gave a little wink, maybe a little kiss as one was going out and one was coming in. So now I have this little baby and a commute, and I'm like, God, what am I gonna do? Really, what am I gonna do? I pray, and I talk to my husband, and I talk to some of my professors at Georgetown. And they say, Elizabeth, history history of the Middle East and North Africa. Get to know your heritage, get to know your roots. Come back and do a PhD. So I apply, I get in. That summer, we moved down to DC. I think it's a great idea. The baby needs to acquire language. I need to acquire language. The baby needs to sleep. I need to read, right? Perfect idea. What did I know? So it's September of 2001. Some of you in the room know where I'm going. It's the most beautiful day. There's not a cloud in the sky. I'm coming out of my 7 a.m. Arabic class, listening to the radio, and they're saying Congress and the Senate are being evacuated. Plane has hit World Trade, somewhere I was just 6 months ago. So I literally run up the steps, slam myself into the apartment door. There's my husband holding our little baby on the phone to Italy, watching the news as 9/11 is happening. I was saying to myself, what am I doing in Arabic class today? Am I doing the right thing? Am I where I'm supposed to be, Lord? Some people moved out of town the next week. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen in DC. That night, we thought they were going to gas us. I mean, there were a lot of rumors. Overnight, there were no airplanes in the sky. That's a very eerie feeling. There were National Guard tanks on the corner of M and P, and we have this little baby we're supposed to take care of. In fact, the only thing we could do was pray, really. And we did, and it gave us a lot of comfort. It really did. And DC was really, really crazy during that time. Not only did we have 9/11, but we also had the anthrax scare. We had the DC snipers happen when we were living there. I mean, there was a lot to worry about, and I don't think that if we didn't have our faith to guide us and protect us, we would have exactly known where to go in that moment. And I think after everything you've lived through for the past 3 or 4 years, you know what times of great uncertainty do to us, and how important having some faith, some prayer practice, some connection with something bigger than we are can be. Because I'm a historian who's always shocked and amazed when history happens. And we've lived through an awful lot of history so far. But thanks to that PhD in history, I was able to research and live with my husband and 2 children after Lorenzo. I have a little girl named Ella. And we lived in research in Egypt, Italy. We ended up living in the UK for almost 10 years. Sri Lanka, Turkey. I mean, amazing, amazing blessings that I never, ever could have dreamed up on my own. But through prayer, through reflection, through saying yes, I've been able to walk into opportunities, did the hard work, put in the work, put in the prayer, and was able to be present at the right time, in the right place. So I guess my message to you is that history never stops. Hopefully, it helps us grow our faith. And the people who came before us are as important as the people around us today. And one day, you'll probably have grandchildren, and people who have taken me as students know, you'll have grandchildren who will be asking you about these times and what it was like and what you did. And it's important for you to have a sense of where you are and what your story is in all of this history, so you can tell the next generation. So if there were 3 things I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, this is what it'd be. The first is, don't worry so much. I tell that to my 20-year-old self, and my 30-year-old self, and my 40-year-old self. Don't worry so much. It's going to work out. The second thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is spend less time online. Now, my 20-year-old self would have no idea what I was talking about because there was no online. Trapeze line? Like what? Wiretap? I don't know. But I do think that a lot of things that happened in my life happened because I had to do it. I had no way to sort of escape it or listen to other voices or get flooded by all the voices, especially anonymous voices, right? Which is like the worst. So, I mean, maybe I tell myself to buy Apple too, but that's another thing. And then the third thing I would tell myself is that, and I really believe this with all my heart, God has a better plan for us, has the most amazing imagination than anything we can come up with on our own. I could not have predicted my life. I couldn't have predicted any of it. If I had planned it, it wouldn't have even been this good. So I would say pray, find times of quiet reflection, and remember that there is God in all things, even the most difficult, challenging, grittiest, toughest moments. Thank you.